This all happened when I was only 5 years old, and has been traumatizing me since. I've never told anyone about this, until now. Up until I was in kindergarten, my mother used to put me in daycares or at neighbours' houses, so that she and Dad could go to work. One summer, my mother asked this lady in our development to babysit for me for the summer while she went to work. I don't know what possessed my mother to choose this lady. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was pure stupidity. Maybe it was a combination of both. But either way, my mother entrusted this lady with me for most of the day. This lady had no business being around children, let alone be responsible for them. I honestly believe that this lady was an alcoholic, mainly because she always looked sick and tired. Her eyes were always red and her breath smelled like puke every time she talked. The worst thing, however, was that she was almost never around, basically leaving me unsupervised for several hours. The lady would only be there whenever my mom would drop me off or pick me up. Otherwise, the lady was locked up in her bedroom. Once she had me clean her bedroom as punishment for breaking a few of her picture frames. I didn't break them. I walked in her bedroom only to find several glass bottles strewn all over the floor. The lady had 2 nieces who were staying with her for the summer. I don't remember their names, nor if they were sisters or cousins, but I do remember their ages. The younger niece was around 8 years old. The older niece was around 11 years old. The nieces were the most horrible children that I had ever had the misfortune of meeting. The younger niece was a disgusting and rude brat. The older niece was a manipulative liar and a complete sadist. When I first met them, I was friendly with them. At first, they were friendly back, but things soon began to change. The older niece began bullying me first. The younger soon joined in. First it was name-calling, then it was teasing, then it was stealing, then blaming things on me. In just a week, things had escalated to the point where both nieces began to physically abuse me. The younger niece liked to dump dirt and food on my head and pull my hair. She, along with the older niece, once set my hair on fire. She also liked to steal my lunches, spit on food, pee on the floors, break stuff, and blame it on me. The older niece liked to throw glass bottles at me. She once put broken glass in my cereal and almost tricked me into eating it. When I asked her why she did that, she said that she wanted to see what would happen if I ate it. The older niece also liked to push me into walls and furniture and drag me by the hair, just so that she could beat me up. I couldn't fight her off because she was much bigger than me. Plus, the younger niece would join in and beat me up as well. Every day I came back home with bruises, cuts, and stuff in my hair. My nights were spent trying to pick the glass out of my skin, bandaging my cuts, and washing out whatever stuff was thrown on my head that day. My parents never once noticed. Not even when the bruises and cuts were on my face and arms. I also began to experience panic attacks at this point. Every morning I would wake up and cry hysterically, knowing that I would have to go to that house and be stuck with the nieces all day long. It was only then that my mother finally noticed something was off. One morning my mother asked me why I hated going to that house. I told her about how the girls were beating me up and throwing stuff in my hair. I showed her my cuts and bruises, as well as burn marks from when they set my ponytail on fire. My mother took off work that day and drove to the house to confront the lady and her nieces. She showed the lady my bruises and cuts and demanded an explanation. The lady called her nieces over and had them tell my mother their side of the story. The nieces claimed that I was hurting myself and breaking things to get them in trouble. that they didn't know why I hated them so much, and that they still wanted to be my friends. Believe it or not, my mother believed them, and got angry at me for lying. So she made me apologize to the nieces and the lady for my behavior. She then took me home and spanked me. From that day forward, my mother ignored whatever state I was in whenever she picked me up, no matter how bruised or cut up I was, all because she assumed that I was doing it for attention. So I continued to endure the endless abuse, and the nieces continued to get away with it. I wanted to get away. I wanted to leave in any way that I could. I wanted my mother to believe me. But I knew I couldn't make her. The only thing that I could do was nothing. So I began to zone out and basically became numb. Eventually, I got so numb that I practically felt nothing. By late summer, I had been subjected to 3 months of this. This was also around the time when the lady set up a swimming pool. One day, the lady decided to allow all 3 of us to use her swimming pool, probably so that we wouldn't bother her anymore. She asked my mother one morning if I would like to bring a bathing suit so that I could swim in the pool. My mother told the lady that I didn't know how to swim yet, so she wasn't sure if I should go. The lady assured my mother that she would supervise me and make sure that I stayed in the shallow end. So the next day, Mom had me pack my bathing suit and brought me to the house. For once in a long time, I felt optimistic and happy. The thought of swimming in a pool excited me a bit, so I looked forward to it, even with the nieces involved. When I got there, the lady told me to change into my bathing suit and meet her and the nieces by the pool. When I got there, the lady said I had to listen to some rules before I went in. The lady told me to stay at the shallow end of the pool. She also told the girls that because I did not know how to swim, I wasn't allowed near the deep end. She then went into the house to make a phone call and left, thus leaving me and the girls unattended. Once she was gone, the nieces walked to the deep end of the pool, but strangely didn't jump in. Instead, they sat on the edge of the pool. I went into the shallow end of the pool and played by myself. Surprisingly, they left me alone for about 15 minutes. I was splashing the water, blowing bubbles, and just having a great time. For the first time in weeks, I smiled and laughed. I was having so much fun that I forgot the nieces were still around. That is until I heard them call out my name. The nieces decided to taunt me into going in the deep end. They kept saying that I was a big chicken for being afraid of going to the deep end of the pool, and that I was a big baby if I didn't go to their side of the pool. I decided to ignore them and continued playing. After about a few minutes of their teasing, I had had enough and left the pool. I guess this didn't sit well with either of the girls because as soon as I got out of the pool, the younger niece ran inside and locked me out. I ran to the glass door and pulled on it to get open, while the younger niece stuck her tongue out at me from behind the glass. It was then when I felt 2 arms wrap around my head and shoulders. The older niece had come from behind and grabbed me. She started dragging me by the hair away from the door towards the pool. The next thing I knew, I was tossed into the water. I panicked as soon as I realized that I was in the deep end of the pool. I tried desperately to stay above the water but couldn't. The few times I did, I heard the girls laughing at me. The older niece jumped in the pool and nearly landed on top of me. I felt her hands grab onto my head and pull it down. At one point she was dragging me across the pool. I know this because my knees had scraped against the bottom of the pool. I was flailing about, desperately trying to fight her off and get above water. It wasn't until I felt my hand hit something that the other girl finally let go of me. By that point, we were both in the shallow end of the pool, so I managed to get my footing and get my head above water. I surfaced to hear the sounds of the lady yelling at the older niece, howling in pain. The lady charged into the water and yanked me out of the pool. She pushed me into a chair and stared me down with her bloodshot eyes. "What the hell is wrong with you? I thought I told your stupid ass not to go into that side of the pool. Now look what you've done," she yelled. The lady then pointed at the older niece who had blood running down her nose and was still crying. Through coughs and tears, I tried to tell her that the older niece had thrown me into the pool, but the lady wasn't having any of it. She demanded that I apologize for hitting her niece in the face. I refused to do so and screamed, "No, I hate her!" The lady soon got in my face and started yelling at me. She told me about how I was a stupid girl for not listening to her rules, that I had been nothing but trouble for both her and her nieces, that my mother left me with her because she hated me. I yelled back at her and told her that I wasn't stupid, and that her nieces were mean, that I hate them so much that I wished they would die. The lady flew into a rage and slapped me across the face for saying that. I was too shocked to even cry at this point. The lady then took the opportunity to tell me how wrong I was about her nieces. What a horrible child I am. How dare I tattle on her nieces for my mistakes to get them in trouble? How dare I not listen to her directions about the pool? How dare I attack her niece when she was trying to save me? How could I be so ungrateful to her nieces when I owe my life to them? How could I claim that her nieces were bad children when they were really such sweet and innocent girls? That I would never be as good as her nieces, and that because of my behavior I would never be welcome at her house ever again. The lady then stormed into the house and called my mother to come pick me up. When my mother got there, she was absolutely pissed. She immediately yelled at me for making her get in trouble with her boss for taking the day off to come get me. She profusely apologized to the lady and her nieces and took me home. As soon as she got home, my mother spanked me and told my dad what had happened. My father came home fuming and lectured me about listening to people as well as not being a brat. I was grounded for a month. I haven't been to that house since that incident, nor heard from that lady or her nieces. I drive past that house on my way to work, and I get sick to my stomach every time I see it. I have never told my parents about what truly happened that day. I fear that they'll simply dismiss it as the girls just being kids and me being a brat. I've had years to think about it and come up with an answer as to why this happened. And every time I think about it, this creeping feeling always pops up in my mind. The feeling that this was more than just an unintended accident by the girls. I can't help but feel that the older niece's plan of throwing me in the pool was on a far more sinister level than regular bullying. I honestly think that the older niece was trying to kill me. That the younger niece was acting as lure for me and a lookout for her. And that when the plan went wrong, the younger niece fetched the lady just so she could get me in trouble for going in the deep end and hitting the older niece. But I'll probably never know if that was the case. Though it makes me shudder to think about what kind of adults these two girls have probably grown up to be. I'm not a hateful person, but I sincerely hope that lady's liver has failed and that her nieces have turned on her, and that both of the nieces are rotting away in a prison cell, or locked up in a mental institution. Either way, alcoholic asshat and her psychotic nieces, let's not meet again. To start off, let me tell you that I'm a 20-year-old woman who looks about 15 or 16 without makeup on. and I'm fairly small in frame and height. This happened 2 months ago. It was just after Christmas, and since I'm a pretty crafty person, as a present, I got a gift card for our local arts and crafts store. My parents were going out of town to my grandparents for the day, and I decided to stay home and maybe later go shopping for new DIY projects. I remember my dad getting very serious before leaving and saying, "I really don't want you going out alone. Please be careful if you do, though. Call us and text us with where you're going." It's normal for my dad to be protective, but I can't remember the last time I saw this serious look in him. Still, I let it go, thinking he's just trying to look after his daughter. I had planned on asking my boyfriend to go with me to the craft store, as it's not in that great of a location, but he was stuck at work, and I had gone to college in the area, so I was fairly familiar with it and wasn't too worried about safety. I didn't get ready or do my hair or makeup, but just got in my car. Since it was the one destination in mind, I didn't care about looking nice, and I only wanted to get more supplies to make new projects. I arrived at the store and suddenly got an uneasy feeling. I rushed to the restroom thinking I was about to be sick and vomit, but I didn't. I had no idea why this was happening, but I was just very uneasy and panicky. Again, I let it go, passing it off as my social anxiety getting the better of me. I meandered about, up and down each aisle, trying to decide what to buy when I ended up on the back wall, checking out the clearance section. Then I start hearing a noise that almost sounded like a bird, cooing. Minding my own business, I continued to look at reduced price items, thinking maybe some kids were playing or goofing off. The noise continued for probably 15 more seconds until I finally got too annoyed with it and was about to scold some twerps. But when I turned, I realized it was a man whistling at me. He was standing at the end of one of the aisles, staring directly at me, whistling and grinning the biggest, grossest grin. To make it worse, he was holding onto a basket with an infant in the seat, and his wife was farther down the aisle. This man had the audacity to catcall, hit on me, right in front of his child and wife? I was completely disgusted and immediately scoffed and rolled my eyes, while simultaneously looking to the other side of the store. At this point, I'm in high alert. I'm always pretty aware of my surroundings, but I was watching my back with every turn. I also always carry a stun gun, and had that of safety in my back pocket for easy access. Noting that the man and his family had departed from the clearance section area where this happened, I made my way back to continue looking around, thinking this was the end of my creepy day. Wrong. I saw a man, probably in his 50s, with a 1970s style eyeglass and the obligatory pedophile mustache, and hair to match. Now, at first, I wasn't so quick to judge, and thought maybe he was alone because A, he was a crafty man, and maybe had an affinity for painting birdhouses, or B, he was picking something out for his wife or daughter. Again, I was wrong. I immediately picked up that he was following me through the aisles, as he would only turn to look at what to buy when I shot a glare his way. When I wasn't glaring at him, I saw him staring at and watching me from the corner of my vision. I continued through the aisles, testing him to make sure I wasn't just paranoid from what had previously occurred. Unfortunately, he was following me, staying no more than maybe 50 feet from me at any given time. I was ready to take this guy on. I had already scoped out where the nearest employees were if I needed help, and I was ready to use my stun gun if necessary. I put him to the final test, turning down an aisle and immediately stopping before he turned in. Instead of looking for items, I was staring exactly where our eyes would meet, if he really was following me. He turned into the aisle and our eyes locked. He instantly began to sweat and panic because he had been found out. He pretended to look elsewhere, peering around me like he was looking for someone. Except there was absolutely no one else down the entire aisle, and both of us knew that. He quickly backed out of the aisle and turned and walked out. I listened to his footsteps walk away. Step, 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 until they abruptly stopped no more than 10 feet from where I stood. He was waiting for me. I booked it the other way and exited the opposite end of the aisle. At this point, I was done and just wanted to get home. I practically ran to the register, watching behind my back and keeping an eye on the camera monitors for any sign of this guy. When I got to the register, the man with the baby and wife was a few customers behind in line. I saw him smirk at me and felt him watching me non-stop as I pretended to ignore him. I almost asked for an employee to walk me to my car for safety. Luckily, I knew this guy couldn't make a scene in front of his family, and I had lost the mustache pedophile guy, so I knew I could make it to my car if I was alert. I made it to my car and locked the doors before taking a short sigh of relief. I believe these men thought I was younger and more naive due to my appearance, and thought they could possibly take advantage of me. The worst part is, when I told my parents what happened, my mom responded with, "I didn't think you were going to the store in that location. A man was arrested there last week for taking pictures up young girls' skirts, and is charged with pedophilia." Fortunately, I had pants on and was equipped with a stun gun and common sense that day. So please, if you ever have an uncomfortable feeling, trust your gut. Don't be afraid to ask for help from people around you. Most of all, creepy, disgusting men in the craft store. Let's not meet. So this is by far the creepiest thing to ever happen to me, and has probably contributed a lot as to why I'm so adamant about keeping my home private, my gates locked, and my windows drawn. This took place several years ago. I was 20, and I'd just moved into my great-grandmother's old, rickety 2-bedroom house in a fairly run-down part of town. My neighborhood looked, at one time, to be a small slice of middle-class Americana, but 7 decades had done its share of damage. The small, uniformed row of homes might well have been squat little trailers. My house was the squattest. Other than the street being a little run down, I never felt uncomfortable living there as a woman alone. Days were quiet, and nights were only occasionally disrupted by the faint sound of my white trash neighbors' arguments getting out of hand. My great-grandmother always valued privacy, and at all times had the place shuttered, even to the point of covering the small, diamond-shaped window on the front door. I never saw the need for it. Until one night. I was on the phone with my friend Rachel, after a long night at work. We were shooting the shit about our days when I decided to crack open my front door, to let some air in. Then I heard it. The faint music box-like chiming that grew louder and louder, announcing its presence. "That's weird," I said as I glimpsed out of my small window. "What?" Rachel asked. "An ice cream truck is coming down my street," I mumbled as I tried to position myself to get a better look. "So what?" Rachel asked casually. She was clearly preoccupied with something. "So what? It's 11:30. Who drives an ice cream truck around in the middle of the fucking night like that?" I laughed. Maybe he's drunk or something, I thought to myself as I returned to our conversation. After chatting a bit longer, we said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone. Then suddenly, there it was again. That chiming, Cap Town Races tune. But this time it was louder than ever. I peered outside and predictably saw the familiar sight of a brightly coloured ice cream truck, in addition to the unpredictable sight of the vehicle's shadowy occupant. It was too dark to tell for certain, but I sensed his eyes locked on my house, and me. For almost an hour he stayed there, parked in front of my house, just staring in and playing that music. I sat there frozen and silent. I didn't try to look for fear he'd see me again. Then suddenly the engine sputtered, the music switched off, and I heard him drive away. The relief bubbled up slowly, then washed over me. When I felt safe enough, and knowing there would be no sleeping alone that night, I packed a bag and headed towards Rachel's house. A month or so later, everything was back to normal. My nerves had settled, and there hadn't been any other mystery ice cream truck sightings. In fact, it had become a kind of inside joke between Rachel and I. After a night of heavy drinking, I have to leave my car. I reluctantly allowed Rachel to drive me home, and after half stepping out of the car, she teased, "Night, night, don't let the homicidal ice cream men bite." I slurred a weak response and stumbled inside, making it barely to my sofa before passing out. I awoke to a sharp sense of danger. My eyes darted to my front door, to the diamond-shaped window. There, illuminated by the porch light, was a man's face pressed against the glass. He'd been watching me sleep, and now, noticing I had woken, his face twisted into an awful sneer. Too scared to scream or move, I struggled to remember if I'd locked the door. Before I could react, the door handle jiggled and resisted, sickly answering my question. He mouthed one word as he locked his eyes on me. Hi. The sound of my neighbours pulling into the drive must have scared them off quickly, as they never noticed anything out of the ordinary. I called Rachel, hysterical, and she came and picked me up within minutes. I've since moved to a new area, and will never know if the man in my window and the creepy ice cream truck driver were one and the same. My gut tells me the incidents were connected. So a friendly reminder. Remember to shut your blinds, lock your doors, and cover any small eye-level windows near you. And, creepy, night-crawling ice cream man, let's not meet. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to episode 43. I should probably have done something significant in the outro to episode 42, as is the meaning of life after all. And I did miss a really obvious joke with episode 37. In a row. Well, not important really. Thanks for all the great feedback on my Red Riding Hood story. I was a little unsure what version I wanted to do. The Grimm version had a happier ending, and for some reason I wasn't really in the mood for a happy ending at the time I recorded that. I've been having some mic problems. Seems okay in this recording though. Mic not working properly? The little girl's got to die. Seems reasonable. Right? No? Well, never mind. Tomorrow I've got a recording of Rapunzel. It's already recorded. I'm going to upload it tomorrow. I think it's the Grimm version I'm using. Don't hold me to that because I'd have to stop recording and go check. Which I'll actually do right now. Yeah, definitely the Grimm version I did. And this coming Friday is still going to be a True Subscribers special. Well, or episode 2, depending on how you want to look at it. I am doing them in the order in which I received them, so if you sent me a story recently and it doesn't show up in that video, please don't be alarmed, I'm definitely going to use your story. It will just be in the following subscribers video. I don't want to use them up too quickly because I think it's more of a treat. A rare treat to put out there, as and when I can. Okay, I think that's about time for me to go, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.